There was Newfoundland because it had been
You won
a colony.
you won a Rhodes Scholarship.
Yeah, I won the Rhodes Scholarship, 68. And again, it was a bit from my father. I thought I wanted to study law for some reason. When I got over there, as I think I told you before we started here, I entered into second year studies with any break. I mean, trust, land law, I mean, this terrible stuff, and the weekly assignments. But you're in Oxford, you got Blackwoods, you got some of the greatest lecturers on English literature, some of the editors, some of the prime editors of some of the great voices. Helen Gardner was T.S. Eliot's friend, for God's sake. And she's giving a lecture on Donne. She edited the Donne songs and sonnets. So I became completely absorbed in, I did the law stuff, but I spent more time reading English. I never read this much in my entire life.
What was it like for you to go to Oxford? Had you traveled at all?
No.
This is the first time you'd been to Europe. I mean, the reason I'm asking in part is because I've met some very educated Englishmen like Stephen Fry. And it's really something to meet an educated Englishman because they have a depth of education that's just quite stunning. And it's so impressive when you see it manifest itself. And I've been fortunate enough to talk with people at Cambridge and Oxford who are scholars from the old school, let's say. And it's so impressive to watch them talk and to watch them think. And so you pulled yourself out of Newfoundland and went over to Oxford. How old were you and what was that like?
I was 19, I think. I went to university, as I said, very early. What was it like? I'd had, as I mentioned, 5 years in Memorial studying literature. I should have kept at it, by the way. I should have picked up a DPhil and stayed away from law. I met, like you did, I met some extremely keen minds. I met a guy who could play the Bach toccata on the great organs. I met them in all fields. And that was the only advantage of it to me. By then, maybe a bit young, but nonetheless, I'd settled in pretty well to English literature. And it was that kept dragging me away, as I was just about to say. I don't think I've ever read more in a single year than I did that year there.
Well, that's the thing about university, and I suppose also about those English universities in particular, because you imagine what the university, because I've tried to think, well, what is the university?
Yeah, okay.
Part of it is, well, it's this continuous conversation across centuries. Part of it is the exposure to the greatest thinkers, and for the purpose of mimicry, essentially. I believe that's central to it, because you can pick your peers in some sense. That's what you do when you read great books, is you make these people your peers, at least insofar as you're capable of doing that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But then there's also an identity that it provides you with, is you're a student, you've got this time that's cut out, and now you can go throw yourself into the study, and society has built a wall around you that says you can stay in this room and you're good. Read away, we're happy about it.
Well, that's it. The one thing I will remark, and I don't care how pretentious it sounds, in one area I was a little disappointed. I thought because of the reputation of the university that it would have a surplus, it would have an excess of overbright people who listened to late quartets of Beethoven as they got out of bed. I had a false notion that reality is often just day to day, and while there will be great exceptions, and there were, and people so bright that they embarrassed you if you were standing in front of them. But a lot of it was, apart from the architecture and the grounds, which is first class, it was nice to be there as a kind of a visitor. But the intellectual level, as I said, I probably didn't get out as much as I should. But once I got near the libraries, I became enthralled. And that's the same word as enchanted and charm. I keep reminding people that the art has magic.
Yes. Well, and I think it's really useful to point out the connection between those words, because they all point to the possession, to the capacity to be possessed by this spirit, and it is the spirit that inhabits the university when it's properly conducted.
Yes,
it's the spirit that manifests itself as the creative and communicative conversation that's gone across centuries that you can now immerse yourself in and become a part of. And there isn't anything better than that. That's as good as it gets. That's also why it's so wonderful often to be a university professor or a teacher, is because you can play a role in transmitting that to young people who will benefit immensely from it in all possible ways.
Yeah, it's very true. It's also true, again, I'm sure you have, because you're in the university context. I've met 2 or 3. I'd almost compare them to, some of the great medieval monks. You meet 1 or 2 or 3 people who are so completely immured in the dignity of learning from the past and pursuing great minds, truly learned people. They're almost always in a kind of personal cloister, but there's 1 or 2 or 3 in the course of a lifetime, and you say they're almost priestly about the human being that gives to inquiry, to learning, to the development and fulfillment of mind. And you just know you're in a very special place. Now, again,
well, when I went to teach at Harvard in the 90s, and I was privileged to have a position there for 5 years, 6 years, I guess. And Harvard pulled in senior professors from everywhere who were at the top of their profession. And so there was a handful of senior psychology professors there when I was there. And it was wonderful to talk to these people.
Yeah.
I had never been anywhere where there wasn't anything I could say that they weren't familiar with. It was so amazing. There wasn't a topic I could possibly bring up that these, and it would have been 6 or 7 people, which is actually a lot. It was a small department. Yeah. The senior faculty were absolutely outstanding people, especially the older ones, because they weren't only great psychologists, they were really educated. And so, and they weren't afraid of ideas at all. And my mind ranges across ideas. And I often encounter people with whom I could have a conversation about one thing, but definitely not about another. And I just never ran into that barrier among the older senior faculty members at Harvard. The junior faculty members were impressive in their own right. They hadn't had the whole advantage of a lifetime of study yet. They were headed in that direction. But the senior faculty were remarkable. And you couldn't help but be immensely, what would you say, to be possessed by immense respect in their presence. And it was a privilege to be there.
Well, there's the other thing for the people today, that if the universities become proselytizers and semi-political agitprop, wokeness and all this garbage, they're stealing a lot of joy. I mean, a real university, as you just said, and dealing with people that are better than you. That's the great thing, incidentally. It's such a pleasure. And you don't have... Who has, as you said, you're given freedom to do this and get credit for it as well, and you'll advance in society. But the simple joy of taking in, and especially in the humanities.